What is up, guys? Frosty 0232 here for another Frosty Features. Today we are going to talk about Mighty Thor, Jane Foster as Thor from the comics. Going to see her on the MCU, on the big screen in Thor Love and Thunder. So why not have her in Marvel Strike Force coming in on the new Asgardians team? So if you've never seen a Frosty Features before, this is a comic book background, kind of a little history lesson, a little flavor to your game on who this character is and who makes up the character that you're playing in Marvel Strike Force. So all of the information that I talk about is in reference to Marvel 616, the main canon storyline character. Alright, let's get into it. The Mighty Thor. Name, Dr. Jane Foster. So, in the MCU, she is an astronomer, but in the comic books, she is a nurse turned physician. So she's a medical doctor. So it's quite different. I personally like the MCU twist that she is an astronomer, and that's kind of how she runs into Thor. We're going to talk about how she runs into Thor here, but just so we're aware, the comic book version is a different kind of doctor. She's a doctor, not a star doctor. First appearance, Journey into Mystery, number 84 in 1962. So, Jane Foster has been around since 1962, but when she first picked up that hammer and became the Mighty Thor was back in Thor God of Thunder, number 25 in 2014, which feels so long ago, but as a character, she's been around for so much longer. It's funny because a lot of her background comes from after she became Thor. So she's been around for a long time, but most of her comic book content comes post 2014. So she's been around a long time, but she hasn't had a whole mess of character development before then. There is some. She's got a really good story, but it got amped up to 11 as of 2014. Powers and abilities. All the powers of Thor. So she gets the mantle of Thor by picking up Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, right? So the whole thing about Thor's hammer is that there's a spell on it cast by Odin that whosoever shall wield this hammer gets all the powers of Thor, essentially. Right? So, and it's funny because we see there's a lot of people in canon that can pick up Thor's hammer and they don't turn into Thor, right? There are other characters that do turn into Thor. Eric Masterson turns into Thor. Jane Foster turns into Thor. Beta Ray Bill sort of becomes Thor, sort of. But they have this change in appearance, whereas a lot of other people will grab it. Captain America, really good example, where they don't change at all. So when they hold the hammer, they get the powers of Thor. The powers of Thor. All Asgardians have a kind of set list of powers. They have super strength, super speed compared to, us humans, whatever. Durability. They have increased immunity to sicknesses and things. And then Thor also. His is kind of ramped up. Hers, in this case, is a little bit more ramped up, controlling, different aspects of thunder and weather. Being a capability of flight is only a Thor thing, so she can fly, judging by the currents made by her hammer. So all the powers of an Asgardian, all the powers of Thor in one Jane Foster. Aliases, Valkyrie and the All-Mother. So due to Asgard always being destroyed all the time, there is a point where Frigga, the All-Mother, All-Father being Odin, Frigga being the All-Mother, Frigga is away, and Jane Foster becomes a surrogate All-Mother while she's away at one point. Currently, she is Valkyrie. So she was the Mighty Thor. No longer in the comics is she Mighty Thor. So this is actually a character in the past. She is currently Valkyrie, which is kind of cool because we also have Valkyrie coming to the game, but it's in reference to the MCU Valkyrie. And Valkyrie is a mantle that can be shared by multiple people. But in the comics, she is the one and only Valkyrie right now. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Affiliations, Avengers and Marvel's Medics. So everybody knows what the Avengers is, or who the Avengers are. The Avengers are Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the kind of main team that we look at here in the MCU. She joins the Avengers as a part of them. She is also part of Marvel's Medics, which is a really cool, it's a group of, it's pretty much all the superheroes in Marvel that have a medical degree, which I thought was funny that has a team. So Frosty Features has, to me, in doing the research for these different things, has pointed out these fun teams to me. Marvel's Medics being one of them, where I didn't really know I didn't know that it existed, and it's really just a neat little side thing. There's a team of just the doctors, just in case. They were brought together to if I remember correctly. This could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if this is wrong. They are brought together to try to bring Broomhilda back to life, I believe. She dies, the Broomhilda being like the goddess of Valhalla Asgard, the one that gives a lot of the magic powers to the Asgardians. Background. So I had a lot of trouble actually finding out where Jane Foster was from, but everything I could find kind of lent itself that she's a New Yorker. She's from New York. She definitely works in New York. She works as a nurse for a very long time before she becomes a doctor. Who died? Because you can't be in a comic book without people dying. So Jane Foster has a very, very, very complicated story. Not complicated. Actually, it's very direct. Let me go back on that. She has a very, very sad story. Her parents, her ex-husband, and her child all died and made her who she is. And all of those things happened before she was Thor. So there's that. Unbeknownst to them, but knownst to us, right? So Jane Foster Thor, the big thing about her in the comics is nobody knew she was Jane Foster. So essentially they're like, oh, there's a lady Thor now. Who is that? So in canon, the only people that knew who Jane Foster Thor was, because once again, no longer Jane Foster Thor in the comics. The only people that knew who she was were Sam Wilson, because he saw her kind of power down and transform back to Jane Foster in the Avengers compound, and Doctor Strange, because he see through that shit. He can see through the Eye of Agamotto. Real quick, Doctor Strange sidebar: the Eye of Agamotto lets him see through magical illusions, right? Not whatever it does in the MCU. So it lets him see through any magical illusion. So he could just see Jane Foster, but outside of that, nobody really knew that Jane Foster was Thor. They just knew that it was a lady Thor. She was Thor in all. Even Thor himself did not realize it was Jane Foster until later. So yeah, there's that. So unbeknownst to them, but knownst to us. So we all knew it, they didn't. And it was actually a really well kind of kept secret compared to a lot of the other superhero secret identities. So good stuff. Cancer, both inner and outer struggle. Okay, so the way that, so Jane Foster, we're gonna get into this sad ass backstory. Are you ready? So growing up, her mother dies of cancer when she's 9. Right? So her mother dies of cancer. Her dad gets a second job to try to put her through school, and her dad works his ass off, and he's able to put her through school, get up to college, become a doctor, and after she's in college, her dad dies of a heart attack. So that's how her parents die. She then becomes a nurse for one Dr. Donald Blake, and she works with who's a crippled blonde dude. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And while working with crippled blonde dude, Dr. Donald Blake, she ultimately Donald Blake is Thor. They fall in love. Thor takes her back to Asgard, essentially to get blessings from his parents. Odin does a test to see whether or not she is able to become a goddess. She fails because she is not brave enough, and he sends her back, and she ends up marrying a dude named, this is all going to lead to cancer, I swear to God. It started with cancer, it's going to end with cancer. She marries Kincaid, a Dr. Kincaid, and has a kid. But as time goes on, they get divorced, and then her child and Dr. Kincaid die in a car accident. So everybody dies, and then she finds out she has cancer, right? So the cancer, and it's funny to me that the blog post for Marvel Strike Force did not point out the fact that she has cancer. So I don't know if you can call her a cancer survivor, but she had cancer. She was going through chemotherapy when she picks up the hammer, right? So the hammer, well, we'll talk about her actually getting the hammer later, but what happens is when you pick up the hammer, it removes all the poisons from your body, right? And chemo is a poison. So when she picked up the hammer, all of her chemotherapy essentially was stripped from her body and it metastasized the cancer. So Jane Foster's main thing as Thor is that every time she becomes Thor, she gets more and more sick from her cancer. She has breast cancer. She gets more and more sick from breast cancer. So it becomes a thing that when she becomes Thor, she gets sicker and sicker and sicker, so she starts to die from being Thor, and everybody starts to realize it, and so they're like, yo, you can't become Thor anymore. If you do it again, you're gonna die, right? So we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth here on the second page, but just know that this character is almost the entirety of her, Jane Foster as Thor, it very much hinges on the fact that she has cancer, and they just left that out. I ain't mad. So it's a picture of her, what she actually looks like. This comic still is from when she was turning into Thor the last time. As I said, she's no longer Thor. This is her turning into Thor the last time. Relationships, parents, deceased. Keith Kincaid, deceased. James or Jimmy Kincaid, deceased. Dr. Donald Blake, off and on lover. So Dr. Donald Blake, so in the MCU, I'm referencing the MCU so much in this one because it's kind of where everybody knows Thor and Jane Foster now, so it's just a good jumping off point. So in the first Thor movie, Thor is sent to Earth to learn humility. In the comics, he is sent to Earth as this Dr. Donald Blake. He's a med student in Harvard. He is crippled, and it is all to teach him humility. So he ends up setting up a medical practice, and that's where he meets Jane Foster, and they become a thing. And then when she fails the test to become a goddess, she gets sent back. She falls in love with Kincaid, who is the model that Odin based Dr. Donald Blake off of. So that's how they end up together, right? And Thor, his original love was Lady Sif, who surprisingly is not in Marvel Strike Force. Oh yes, she is. Yes, she is. That is wrong. Lady Sif is definitely in Marvel Strike Force. But in the MCU, surprisingly in the MCU, they don't dive into Thor and Sif's relationship. But Sif is sort of Thor's first love. And there's a whole thing where Sif uses her spirit. She gives Jane Foster her spirit so that she can kind of survive and she becomes more powerful, and there's a whole thing with her and Sif, but ultimately Thor is her on again, off again lover. Notable events: becoming worthy. I said we'd talk about it. Here we are. So as you can see in the picture, that is a pieced together Mjolnir like we saw in the Thor Love and Thunder trailer. So while fighting Thor, I'm gonna throw this out here just because it looks like this could be similar to the plot to Thor Love and Thunder, but as a reminder, when this video was made, Thor Love and Thunder is not out yet. As of right now, it is not out. So if this has anything to do with the plot, I apologize. This is from the comics. So Thor is fighting Gore the God Butcher, who seems like he's the bad guy in Thor Love and Thunder. He becomes unworthy to hold Mjolnir, and he loses it, and he drops it on the moon. So he can't pick it up, right? So he is disgraced, leaves, doesn't know what he's doing, and Mjolnir reaches out telepathically to Jane over and over, telling her to come pick it up, and she has been having she has cancer at this point, and she has different relations essentially with Asgard. So she has, as a human, she has kind of perks, right? So she acts as essentially like Earth or Midgard's ambassador. So she can call Heimdall and have Heimdall send her places. So she has Heimdall send her to the moon so that she can pick up Mjolnir after it kind of like tempts her for so long. So when she goes and picks it up, she becomes Thor, and while she's Thor, it kind of pauses her cancer, but when she comes back, it's worse, right? So she's Thor, and then Thor Odin's son, OG, my dude, comes and sees her, and he's like, yo, give me back my hammer. And she's like, this is my hammer now, guy. And as he sits there and thinks about it, he's like, well, if she's worthy to hold the hammer, it's hers. It's no longer mine, whatever. So he actually gives her his blessing, even though he still just accepts that she is Thor. And he only goes by Odin's son after that for quite a while, until she no longer is Thor. She, loses the mantle or whatever. So yeah. The final Valkyrie. So where we're standing at right now in the comics, Jane Foster is Valkyrie. She is the only Valkyrie that's left. There was a big thing about the incursion, but ultimately Jane Foster, Thor, Mighty Thor, however you want to look at it. Mighty Thor is really tough because Thor Odin's son, regular Thor, has been referred to as Mighty Thor for years and years and years. And then when Jane Foster became Thor, she also is referred to as Mighty Thor. So I apologize for having to keep saying Jane Foster Thor. It's the best way to keep it straight in my brain. So I said the cancer metastasizes. She is getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And they're like, if you become Thor one more time, you're going to die. And then Asgard's about to be destroyed. And she's like, damn it, I got to do it. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm about to have to go this way. And she goes that way. The cancer gets worse. And she takes care of the problem. And then she freaking dies. And she dies. And then Thor Odin's son comes in. And he's freaking out. He's like, this can't be a thing. And in the fight, it was very symbolic. But her pieced together Mjolnir got broken when she was fighting, because it was like, her last hit, her last fight or whatever. So she broke it over I believe you pronounce his name Lumpy. He broke it over his eye, Frost Giant, and she's dead. And then Thor's like, I'm gonna fight the goddess that there's a Tempest goddess that lives inside Mjolnir. I'm gonna fight her and I'm gonna revive Jane. And that's not going so well. And then Odin is like, I also want to revive Jane. And they come back and they fight. They get her revived. She comes back to life because comics, and she's alive again, but Mjolnir's dead, so she can't wield the power of Thor. And then Mjolnir changes into this brace, this van brace you see right here on her arm. And that's sort of like it, she maintains superpowers, but she isn't Thor. It's kind of different, right? So this can change. Her van brace can change into different types of weapons and stuff. Which is pretty cool. But essentially, so Thor goes around and he starts picking up bodies, and he's like, well, in this fight, all the Valkyrie died, so there's no way for their souls to go to Valhalla. So what are we gonna do? And then Broomhilda, I believe, was like, yo, Jane Foster, you're pretty qualified to be a Valkyrie. Do you want to be our Valkyrie? And she was like, yeah, dude, I'll be Valkyrie. Oh, and since she died, the cancer's gone. Because that's how death works. When you die, all problems before that go away, and when you're revived, you're just fine. So she no longer has cancer, and she is the Valkyrie. So she is the final Valkyrie. She is the last one on Asgard that takes them souls back. So as we stand right now, she is Valkyrie. Next episode of Frosty Future is going to be over Valkyrie. Not the Jane Foster version. So, power scaling. So, we always talk about power scaling. Power scaling does not matter in Marvel Strike Force. They do not take that into account whatsoever. But, for our sakes, this is how I look at it. Multiversal. If you are a multiversal power level, you are a threat to reality and existence as we know it, and anyone in any dimension knows it. You can cause a multiversal lapse, and you can end existence in every sense. Universal. Maybe you can end existence in your dimension. Maybe you can hop over to the next one and end that one. You are a universal threat, right? Cosmic. Planetary bodies with a little grit and determination. Maybe galaxies or solar systems. So cosmic's quite powerful. On the high end, galaxies maybe. And on the low end, maybe a planetary body or two as you're going. Nuclear. So nuclear is you know, equivalent to a nuclear bomb. So maybe you could take out, on the low end, a small city, high end, countries with a lot of grit and determination. Maybe a single planetary body is something that you can destroy. Yes, city level. So city level is the most common for Marvel heroes. City level, thinking like Spider-Man or Daredevil. City level is you can easily take out a brick wall if you are like a concrete wall, and if you with a lot of, you know, vim and vigor, you can run around and take out a building or something. So city level is kind of where a lot of Marvel heroes are at. And Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns in Marvel Strike Force. For the sake of argument, we're calling Greg a human level threat. So if I had some very well-placed Legos on the floor and I was really angry in between me and Greg, I could theoretically take out Greg because I know, you know, how to get around the Legos because they're already placed well. So I, as a human, could take out Greg. So for the sake of argument, our undead Asgardian buddy Greg is a human level threat. And in the case of the Mighty Thor, I rate her as a cosmic level threat. So Thor himself is quite powerful. He is definitely one of the strongest Avengers. The Mighty Thor, in this case, Jane Foster, has the same physiology as an Asgardian when she is Thor, so she has all of those bonuses. She is physically as strong as Thor because magic, right? She has all the thunder powers, lightning, etc. But she also, which Thor is a cosmic level, but I would argue that the Mighty Thor is, in this case, is lower than Thor Odin's son, just for the fact that every time she Thors up, every time she morphs into Thor, she dies a little bit more, right? She also is stronger when she has the spirit. I said that Sif fused her spirit with her. She is stronger when she has the spirit of Sif. She can actually also teleport, but she loses that often, and she doesn't have it as Valkyrie, and she doesn't have it on the end of her being Thor and the end of her run as Thor. But when she has it, she's even more powerful, and there could be some arguments made that she's stronger than Thor Odinson at that point. But on the whole, just to put it on this scale, cosmic threat below Thor Odinson. Cool. And so that is Frosty features the Mighty Thor. Let me know what you thought in the comments. I messed up a couple of things earlier, but that's a-okay. Rail me for it. That's chill. I don't care. Let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong, what you liked, whatever. Give me a like. I stream every Sunday at 8 a.m. on Twitch on the link above. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. And most importantly, everyone, stay cool.